I spent around 1 year and 5 months without traveling, and for someone who likes to be around the world constantly, I gotta say that was really a long time. And at that point, I was already wondering what it's really like to travel during the pandemic. I was scared, I was nervous, I didn't know what to expect in terms of the travel experience, and I was recently able to go to the US. And I want to share some of the experiences that I had in this recent travel experience with you so that hopefully you can avoid any problems, you can know what to expect as well, and you can be prepared for the upcoming months when maybe things start opening again. Hopefully you can travel again. I remember when I first arrived to Mexico, that was 15th of January of 2020, and I was definitely not planning on staying that long. I was coming here for a visit. It was a couple of months, maybe 2 or 3 months. That was literally my plan. And all of a sudden, things started to just change. The whole spectrum of traveling was just very weird. Nobody knew what to expect. Nobody knew what was happening, what was going to happen. We didn't know that that was the last time that we were gonna be able to travel in the way as we know it. There's been a lot of things that have changed, but there are also a couple of things that are pretty much the same. Now, one of my main concerns from the beginning was the predictability and the uncertainty in those changes. Prior to what was happening, we could just research and see what visa restrictions we needed, what we actually had to take over so that we were allowed into a country. But right now, the procedures are so different and are just constantly changing that it is one of the things we don't know. And that uncertainty can really pull back a lot of people from actually traveling. And that was definitely something that stopped me as well. I didn't want to be part of any lockdowns. I definitely did not want to get the Rona. And just too much bureaucracy when it comes to maybe the papers, everything else that you have to handle in case that an emergency happens, which is definitely something that you don't want to have when you are in a different country. And as I was heading to the airport, I was really wondering what it was going to be like, wearing the mask and everything that you had to do in order to get through security. All these details I'm going to be sharing with you. First of all, let me say, I was 1 year and 5 months late into the traveling once this whole thing started, but the airport was really way more crowded than I expected. I thought at least it would be relatively busy, but you don't know, you have no idea. It was like crazy busy. The airport seems to be establishing certain protocols to actually have those flows of people, that procedure where you can allow such a mass of people go through the airport every day. Of course, there are certain things they have to take into account. The airport has to be very clean and they have to be constantly sanitizing and whatnot. As we were checking in our bags, we were approached by the airline staff and we were also asked for the COVID test. And we had to have a COVID test done prior to the traveling, 48 hours. And that way we could get a stamp right here, as you can see it in the passport, that allowed us to get on board in a faster manner. I was also told that there are specific face masks that you can wear and there are specific face masks that you can't wear. You're not allowed to get on board if you don't have one of those types of masks. So you gotta be careful with that. There was also a couple of temperature checks as you get through the TCA. Getting through security may vary. A lot of the times people were getting the temperature check. Some of the people weren't, which is, I don't know, I'd say it's just funny. Besides that, the whole procedure of taking your stuff out and putting it back in and taking your shoes off and whatnot, that was just completely normal. That was just as any other time at the airport. When it comes to the activity, to the restaurants, to things like that, everything, at least in Mexico, let's just talk about that first, but everything was just open, everything was operating as normal. And although, of course, you had to wear a face mask and whatnot, but things seem to be kind of getting back to that flow and having that momentum as long as you had certain measures, distance measures and sanitizers and things like that. We were there at the airport lunch. We spent around 40 minutes at the airport lunch. We had food. Nothing was packed. Everything was just regular food. We were served normally. We had drinks. And after that, we headed to the flight gate. Now, once we were heading to the gate, I was so surprised for the amount of people that there were at the gate. It was just crazy crowded. It was crazy crowded, and I certainly did not expect things to be in such a manner. And also, Before getting into the flight, you have to show a QR code, which you are told to fill once you're going through security and through immigration. And at least some of the countries are asking for it. Apparently not all the countries ask for it. Mexico has one of those, and China is another country where you have to fill in a health declaration form prior to the traveling, so that you can say that you're fine, that you don't have COVID, that you don't have any symptoms, whatnot. That turns into a QR code, which you are then carrying with you in your phone. People can scan you, at least security, and someone who allows you through can scan so they can see what it is, that you're safe, that it's okay, and that you are good to go. Let me see if I can find the QR code. Nope. Anyway, once you have that negative test, you have the stamp right here, you have the QR code. That means you have green light and you're good to go and you're able to get on board. And the boarding process was a bit more tidy and more organized. It was before you used to see that people were getting on board by sections, like section 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The time that I was getting on this plane, instead of doing it by sections, it was actually by rows. So that made it a bit more organized when you were getting on, when you were putting your bags. It was not all the people waiting in line and just, just standing there before that guy puts his bag on. And, okay, are you done yet? Okay, now this guy. Yeah, it's nothing like that anymore. Well, at least in that experience. And you have to understand something, that it's just a parenthesis though, but I cannot generalize for what's happening in every country, but some of the airlines are implementing these things, and you got to take into account that not all of them are the same. So if I'm talking about one specific thing, or at least my experience, it doesn't mean that every airline is doing it. Now that we get that out of the way, the flight was actually full. It was like, no kidding, it was actually full. I couldn't find one available seat. When I started to think about it, I was sitting with my dad and my brother, but it just didn't make sense at some point, because you were always told that you need to have those measures between distance. And I thought maybe the middle seat was going to be empty and you had the two other spaces being used by people. But that was not the case. It was actually 1, 2, 3. The 3 seats were full, regardless of whether you are a family or your friends or you're strangers. You had to sit relatively close to some of the people. And that of course meant that you couldn't take your face mask off. Now the dynamic inside the plane, as I was saying, you have to keep your face mask on, and they do have pre-packaged food. Of course it depends on the flight. It was relatively a short flight, it was 3 hours or so. So you do not have, at least in my case, the experience of having pre-packaged food that is well served. It was just a bag of peanuts and maybe a drink or something. But some airlines, I've heard that some airlines have actually banned food completely to avoid having problems with that and people getting the Rona. Besides that, the protocol was pretty normal. Of course, at the time that you're eating, the time that you're drinking, you can kind of take your face mask off. Maybe between that, say 10 minutes or 20-minute break that you are eating and stuff, there is no problem. But if you're not wearing your face mask on after that time, then the flight attendants and everyone on board actually tells you to wear it. So if you are someone who really doesn't like wearing face mask and can't stand having that thing on for a long time, well, maybe you're not ready to travel yet. The planing was also the same structure, the same protocol, just getting off by rows. We had to wait, and that's something I liked, because a lot of times you reach a country and then there's never that person who stands up before the plane is even ready yet, and they're just rushing to get their bags and they want to get off so quickly. And so it becomes like, I'm sorry to say it, but it becomes like a supermarket, like a crazy supermarket. I enjoyed that part because we were just sitting relaxed without being rushed and without having that urge to get off the plane, just standing up and waiting for the doors to open. When it comes to entering the country, at least in this case, in the US, I really thought it was going to be more complicated as well. Going through customs, I was asked what I was doing, what I did for a living, why I was traveling to the US. I certainly didn't lie. I said that I was heading there to get vaccinated and that it was just a couple of days. And that was pretty much it. Because I was telling them that I was gonna get vaccinated, I did not need a vaccine to access the US. I've mentioned it before, but it seems to be a growing business where people are heading and flying to the US to get vaccinated because they have access to it. It's pretty fast and people just want to get it done. But the type of vaccine can also influence the entrance and your travel mobility depending on where you're traveling. I have heard of some cases where some specific vaccines are not allowed in some countries. So imagine, and you gotta be careful with that as well, because imagine you get vaccinated and you're so hopeful that you're gonna be able to travel once again. You head to a country where that vaccine is not allowed, and next thing you know, you're just stranded at the airport. You have to go back, you have to change your plans. It can get complicated, so you really have to be aware of, if you get vaccinated, you have to be aware of which vaccine you have and which countries allow that for your mobility. It's something you have to take into account. And I also realized there are certain circumstances that vary between countries because, and of course, there are some people in Mexico that don't really care. They don't wear the face mask. Maybe they are vaccinated already. They think like nothing is going to happen. But I was so surprised to see that like 70% of the people in the US weren't actually wearing face masks. I thought that was a very large number despite them being vaccinated. So everywhere you went, people weren't using face masks. And I realized that every country, they're doing kind of what they please or what they see to be their circumstance at that moment. So it is hard to constrain the Rona because some countries are opening, some countries are in lockdown, and now everyone is doing their own thing. It kind of becomes a mess. And so there is no way to control that between two countries. If there is certain mobility between those two countries, maybe the country that is not in lockdown will keep on bringing the Rona to a different country. The point here is that every country is doing certain things differently, and you have to be aware of where you're traveling and how their dynamic is so that you can have no issues at all, if you are willing to do that and if you're willing to adapt and respect. And I think the overall conclusion in that travel experience is things are kind of getting back to normal in the last few months, but there are certain restrictions and there's constant changes that you as a traveler have to be aware of so that you can avoid having any type of issues, which is, as I was saying, the whole point of this video. So hopefully this video is really helping you out. And I would say that after a year and 5-6 months, the dynamics at the airports haven't changed that much. Of course, there are certain few protocols and things that you have to follow, but that experience in a general overview is kind of relatively the same, but there are certain things that you have to take into account. The traveling experience definitely feels slightly weird during these times. And I know that it is not going to be normal, it's not going to be back to what it was ever before, because things are always evolving, they're changing, and we have to readapt to those changes as well. But that doesn't mean that we're gonna stop traveling and that we're not gonna be able to travel. So just take that into account. It certainly won't be as different, but there are a couple of things that have changed and we'll have to get used to them. We'll just have to get used to them. Maybe some of the countries are overall more strict. They have more documentation, there's more fees that you gotta pay, and just overall more bureaucracy, which kind of makes it slower and less enjoyable in certain ways. But I know that in the end of the day, if you head to that destination, wherever it is that you want to go, you'll be able to enjoy as long as you are taking care of yourself and you stay up to date with what is happening and how the traveling is really changing. So I hope this video has been helpful for you. I wrote this during my traveling experience. This is something that I saw for myself. And as I was saying, maybe it isn't the same in every place, but hopefully you get something positive out of it. And I'd love to know down in the comments below what your biggest takeaway is. What is the way that this video has helped you? And also don't forget to subscribe if this is a video that you are enjoying. Then make sure you binge watch the entire playlist that I have right here, traveling during the pandemic, so you can get more insights of what it is to travel during these times. Take care and I'll see you soon.